Hi, my name's Ian Wallace. I call myself the Messed Up Counsellor, which is quite an intriguing name. And the podcast you're about to see is one of many, and we've been doing about a year now. So you can look back and see all the things we've talked about with guests and on my own over the process. A lot of the information I use in the podcast initially came from the first book I wrote in 2011. Why do we do that? What do we do about it? And that came out and was the basis of all my learning, understanding at that time, which is going back a few years now. And that process of understanding how the world works for people, how we can alter, change, and adapt it, was kind of what it was there to do with the initial stages. I've made that now an audiobook as well, so it's available on Amazon as an audio file that you can check out and you can download to your heart's content, and hopefully that will be helpful. In the podcasts, we're trying to look at all sorts of things about human interactions, human dynamics, the world, and how we might understand it more or change it more. So it gives you lots of ideas and tools in order to think about and look at different ways of being or dealing with things. And hopefully that brings people together and makes people more able to connect and communicate. Lots of topics. If you ever want to connect to me, just obviously drop me a comment on the podcast and I shall try as much as possible to reply. And if you've got any ideas of things that we might want to use on the podcasts, then please let me know. My name's Ian Wallace. Thanks for looking and thanks for listening. Hi, and welcome to another weekly podcast from Ian Wallace, the Messed Up Counsellor. If you subscribe, like, and share these podcasts, then obviously it'll get it to a wider audience, which would be really helpful. And that process could help other people around you, which people don't usually tell you the things they're going through. So these kind of ideas, thoughts, understandings, ways of working the world might be helpful to the people without you even realising it. So today, what I'd like to talk to you about is isolation. There's a follow-on from the last podcast. Isolation and alienation, is it keeping you safe? Or just another way of expressing your individuality. And we're all individuals, thankfully. When we go through this feeling of isolation or alienation, somebody's moving away from us. Somebody's detaching from our world, our life. Those processes, as I've said in the previous podcast, are never easy. Emotionally distraught because of the wider implications usually. Is it keeping us safe if we isolate and alienate? Yes, in some senses, no in others, which is a bit confusing, I know. Yes, it's keeping us safe because our world is ours, quite naturally. And in order to be us, sometimes we have to move away from and be less connected to, for all sorts of reasons. If we isolate ourselves, it's helping us to be more secure, more safe in some ways. And that safety and security will help us to maybe be more reflective, more understanding of self, maybe finding ourselves, which I know is a crass statement, but I think it's true. I think in any relationship with anybody, we give up some of ourselves for the other person. So they have skills, abilities, ideas, thoughts that we take on board instead of our own. And that's normal, that's natural. As we kind of isolate ourselves and move away from that influence, if you like, that structure, the pieces that they've given us, the pieces that they've supplied, whatever they may be, we would have to do on our own. So I was never a great cook, and I still aren't a great cook. Beans on toast is my healthy ingredient. But in the time that I was going through a divorce and separation where I was on my own, I learned that yes, I can cook. Yes, I can do things. Um, I'm not good at it. It wasn't necessarily the most productive process and taste, should I say. But some things I got right, and sometimes people were, respectful and validating what I'd done. So it is that I can do it, but I'm not good at it. So consequently, when I get into a relationship, that part of my world, if they're obviously better than me, which most people are, I kind of leave to them because they're good at it. And they're good at what they do. So we kind of do that on all sorts of fronts. That's just one example. So when we move away from people, we have to find those bits. So I had to find how to cook, how to make meals, how to feed myself, you know. And I always remember when I went through that process, which was many years ago now. Somebody I was living in their house kind of said to me, lovely guy who looked after me somewhat at that time with housing. Said to me, well, you're okay because there's an Indian takeaway, there's a Chinese takeaway, there's a chippy, there's a bar down the road that does meals. So, you can survive 7 days a week and have different types of food. And it was an idea. It was a very expensive idea, obviously, but it was an idea. So I could have survived in that way. But anyhow, I digress. My apologies. So as we're going through this kind of process of finding oneself, finding who we are and the skills and abilities we are, there'll be stuff that we didn't know we were good at, and we are, and there'll be stuff that we know we're not good at, and so we might find other alternatives, other people to supply those things, like the takeaways. And as we grow in our sense of self, our awareness of the capabilities we have and the skills and qualities we have, that will change us. And in that sense, it is a positive, definitely a positive, because the more we grow, the more we develop, the more we understand ourselves, the better of part of us we can be, the better aspect of us we can be, the better ideas, better processes that we give ourselves, identity, if you like. So that keeps us okay, helps us grow and develop. Where there's a downside in alienation and isolation is if we alienate and isolate ourselves and not look at reflection, not look at taking on board those skills, abilities. And, severely depressed people do isolate themselves and they don't necessarily grow, develop in that time. So it's really hard sometimes to have that as part of your world and your life, that isolation. But we do look at that in our world of counselling as a process of safety, in a sense, because the more I'm only responsible for me and the smaller and smaller space I take up, then the more in control I am of my world. The problem with that is that isolation can, unfortunately, sometimes destroy our world because we grow smaller and smaller space-wise, and we have to get tighter and tighter in ourselves, removing ourselves from any external interaction. I've worked with people over the years who have had these kind of processes as part of their world and life, and they would have, as an example, fear of the post coming through the post box because they've no idea what's in the envelope or in the letter, what it's going to say. So in order to take control, they don't open the letter. Now, obviously, people correspond to us and they send us things and bills and reminders and all sorts of things via email or via letter and post. And if we don't open them, then it can be a really significant issue Certainly if, somebody say you've not paid your rent, then you might lose your house. So that process of making our world smaller and smaller doesn't necessarily help us because we are not reaching out. So I suppose what I'm saying is that if we do the reflection and we do that reaching out process to find other people that are similar to us or other situations that are similar to us, that in itself could be helpful. But if we do that isolation and don't reach out, that then could have a negative impact on our world and our lives. And then people can take advantage of that, as we see with social groups on some kind of media presentation. So, the forums and things where the influence is from an external process, changing our world, our lives, our thoughts, our ideas. But from somebody we don't know, we just see them online and they give us an idea of who they are with maybe a picture and maybe an idea of who they are as to what they like, what they don't like, some profile. But chances are that might not be a true profile. They may be, unfortunately, lying. And so you never really know who they are. So when we reach out, for me, the best way of reaching out is personal connection outside of some electronic device so that we get a sense of this person, the reality of them, who they are. Now, they can still obviously give us an idea of who they are, which is not true. Much harder, though, when you meet somebody face to face. Much harder because you have all the facial stuff that you can interact with. And you, obviously, they don't walk around with a picture over their head, so you see who they really are. So I suppose that's the time when it doesn't help, when we isolate and alienate ourselves without that reaching out to other people. So initially, yes, you may do that through some kind of social grouping, social media process electronically. Eventually, though, that would be helpful to do it face to face or in some kind of shared real life experience. And that then would be a better way of reaching out in my world as a process of building us, developing us, growing us. So yes, it does keep us safe, but not always. And if we have somebody that we care about and they are starting to isolate themselves, withdraw, take themselves into their own world, as a therapist, as a counsellor, whenever I'm working with anybody who does not connect verbally or doesn't talk or share, goes quiet, if you like, those people I'm more concerned about than the people that have the outburst in the room and the, sometimes intense feelings and emotions in front of me. At least I'm getting to understand who they are and what they're doing and why they're doing what they're doing. I've got a sense of them. The people that isolate and withdraw and go into themselves and don't verbalise, don't share, we're usually much more uncomfortable with for their safety and security, not comfortable for us. Because that we don't know, we don't understand, and we can't make any initial structure of help because they're not verbalising, they're not communicating. So if you're a parent and there's some trauma going off in their world and their life, and sometimes we can see that as being helpful, that they're not creating a disturbance in our life. But if they're withdrawing and isolating and going into their own place and only communicating through this like electronic media process, you generally need to have a conversation that can help explore that, bring them out of that room, obviously with their agreement, not forcing them because that won't work, but kind of bring them out, get them to connect, share, try to get them to talk, to verbalise where they are, what's going on for them, Because if we isolate, generally speaking, we are not necessarily helping ourselves in the process. So does it keep us safe? In some senses, yes. But sometimes it's not a positive process. And that's different for everybody. That's not the same. As long as we're reaching out, as long as we're sharing, as long as we're interacting in reality with another human being, we can become more able to understand us and them and build some kind of interconnected process, which still might be not necessarily healthy, obviously. But for the people around us who do respect us, value us, and connect to us and want us to be the best person we can be, that reaching out to them is the way forward. People sometimes get pulled into all sorts of strange places because they feel that they have a connection, they feel they have a family type situation where people care for them. And initially that might be true. Manipulate controllers do that. And they initially seem like they're very caring people. But it can dwell you into and draw you into, shall I say, places where it's definitely unsafe. And that manipulation control can be abusive. So as we're working through the process of isolation, if it's to help us grow, become us, be the person we would like to be, that's absolutely fantastic. If it isn't, then you need to be a bit careful and guarded. And if you know anybody that's going through those processes, you need to be a bit careful and guarded for them. Try to open up the dialogue, conversation, talk about, share, understand where they are, what they're going through, how they feel about things. Because 10 to 1, that by opening that up, it'll make the connection better between the two of you, obviously. But it'll also make them feel more accepted and more part of the world and more able to reside in the world. And that fear and worry and concern will be less. The fear and worry, concern of opening up that dialogue with them because you don't want to upset them or you don't want to target them or whatever reason can be detrimental. Because if we don't know something, we generally make it up in our minds as to what it may or may not be. But that's not working with reality. That's working with our internalized reality, our perception, our reality. But opening it up dialogue gives us the reality, as I've said on previous podcasts. So having that conversation, opening up with that person, reaching out, connecting to others, is a growing, a developmental process of change. Great stuff. If it isn't, then you need to have a think about what's really going on for that person. Hopefully that's made sense for you. Hopefully that's given you ideas, thoughts, kind of things to ponder. And if it is something that you're going through at the moment or somebody that you know is going through at the moment, then maybe having that dialogue, having that conversation, opening up that kind of pathway is going to be helpful. Please like, share, subscribe these podcasts. Not for my benefit. I don't do any of this for my benefit, just for other people. And then hopefully it will help somebody cope with life where they may be going through something that you haven't realised. And that is going to be helpful at the end of the day. My name's Ian Wallace. I'm the Messed Up Counselor. Take care. Enjoy. Hi, thanks for listening to the podcast, and hopefully it made sense and was interesting for you. Please subscribe, like and share. With the podcasts, you never know who will be helped by the things we talk about, things we share. We don't normally tell people our problems, but by sharing it and helping other people to understand things. The book Insecurity, It's All About Me, is also available now through Amazon. And it gives you an understanding of what drives insecurity, how insecurity works within our human dynamics, and how you can get a much more secure connection with people. It gives you lots of ideas and thoughts, which is really good. So thanks for listening. Subscribe, like, share, hit the button. And if you've got any comments, please give me them and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks very much. Take care.